When people in town say Brooks Family Diner, they always picture my dad behind the counter, grinning like he still runs the place. That's how it's always been, even though I've been the one keeping it alive for the past 8 years. My name is Amelia Brooks. I'm 32 years old, and I live in a small town just outside Portland, Oregon. I grew up inside this diner, literally. My earliest memory is of standing on a wooden stool so I could reach the counter while rolling pie dough with my dad. Other kids spent their weekends at soccer games or birthday parties. I spent mine learning how to make biscuits fluffy and coffee strong enough to keep the loggers awake on their night shifts. Dad built the diner from scratch. He poured every ounce of himself into it, and I admired him for that. Back then, I thought taking over the diner would be my destiny. It wasn't even a question. When I left for college to get my degree in hospitality management, I already knew I'd come back home. I even turned down offers from culinary schools in New York and San Francisco. Those places felt too far from my roots, too far from Dad. Coming home after graduation, I promised myself I'd make the diner better than ever. And I did. I redesigned the menu, modernized our online ordering system, and started a farm-to-table weekend special that turned into a local sensation. Revenue almost doubled over the years, something Dad didn't think was possible in a town this small. But even with all that, my name has never been on the sign. It still reads Thomas Brooks Family Diner. And I keep telling myself that's fine, that one day it'll be my name up there. Sometimes, late at night when I'm the last one wiping down the counters, I wonder if I made the right choice. I've sacrificed almost everything for this place. Relationships fizzled out because I couldn't leave the diner alone for a weekend trip. Friends stopped inviting me to parties because I was always too busy. My ex-boyfriend Brian once told me I treated the diner like a child, and he wasn't wrong. Dad never said outright that I'd inherit the place, but I believed it was implied. I thought every birthday I missed, every holiday I worked, every ounce of sweat I poured into this place would prove I was the one who deserved it. Now I'm starting to wonder if all those sacrifices have made me invisible. Last week, Dad praised the diner's success during a town council meeting, calling it his proudest accomplishment. He mentioned the new menu and the online ordering system like they were his ideas. I smiled through it like I always do, but inside, it stung. I tell myself it doesn't matter who gets the credit as long as the diner thrives. But deep down, I want people to know I'm the reason it's still standing. I want my father to look at me and say, "You've earned this." So far, that moment hasn't come. Still, every morning, I unlock those doors before sunrise, telling myself that all this hard work means something, that the Brooks family diner will one day be mine. When Sienna walked back into the diner, it felt like a scene out of some family drama on TV. I was behind the counter, refilling the sugar dispensers, when the bell above the door jingled and there she was, glowing, tanned, and effortlessly stylish like she had just stepped off a plane from Paris, which, honestly, she probably had. "Amelia!" she said, her voice bright and airy as if the past 10 years had been nothing but a casual gap between visits. "You look exactly the same." That stung, even though I forced a smile. "Sienna, you're back." She hugged me before I could even put the sugar down, smelling like expensive perfume. I felt sticky from sweat and fryer grease, standing there in my apron while my sister looked like an ad for a luxury travel magazine. Sienna had spent the last decade globetrotting as a food photographer. Every now and then, I'd see her posts on social media, sipping cappuccinos in Rome, hiking in Thailand, taking dreamy photos of some perfectly plated seafood in Greece. Mom and Dad bragged about her constantly, their adventurous girl with a creative eye. Meanwhile, I was here, working 10-hour shifts at the diner, making sure payroll was met and that we didn't run out of pie crusts. That night, Mom insisted we have a family dinner at their house. I went straight after closing the diner, still smelling faintly of French fries. Sienna was already there, perched on the couch with a glass of wine, telling stories about being invited to a private chef's table in Italy. Dad's eyes practically sparkled as he listened. "You should have seen the market in Barcelona," Sienna said, showing them photos on her phone. "The colors, the energy, it's nothing like here." I sat quietly at the edge of the couch, picking at my fingernails. Not one question about how the diner was doing, not even a thanks for holding down the fort. Then Sienna looked at me and smiled sweetly. "You know, Amelia, the diner's great and all, but maybe it could use, I don't know, a creative spark, something fresh. Don't you think it feels a little outdated?" My stomach tightened. It was just a casual comment, but I felt the first real pang of unease. I'd spent years keeping this place alive, and now suddenly I wasn't sure if that was enough. The following Monday, Dad called a family meeting at the diner. That never happened unless something serious was going on. I assumed it was about the new equipment we needed or maybe a staffing issue. I had no idea I was about to be blindsided. We gathered in the back booth after the lunch rush. Me, Sienna, Dad, and Mom. Dad sat at the head like it was a board meeting. He cleared his throat, looking both proud and nervous. "I've been thinking about the future of Brooks Family Diner," he began, glancing at me for a moment before turning to Sienna. "With all the changes in the industry, I think it's time we modernize things. Give it a little shine." I frowned. "I've already updated the menu, Dad. Online ordering is running smooth, and we've had record sales the last 2 years. What exactly needs modernizing?" "That's the thing, honey," Mom said gently. "We love what you've done, but we think there's room to take it further. With Sienna's experience and eye for trends." Sienna sat up straighter, smiling like she'd been waiting for this cue. "Dad and I talked," she said, "and I'm coming on board as the new brand experience director. I'll be revamping the look. Menus, interior decor, maybe even our social media presence. The place has a ton of potential, but it could use more personality." I felt my jaw tighten. "Brand experience director? Since when do we need one of those?" Dad raised a hand like I was being unreasonable. "Don't get upset, Amelia. You and Sienna will work together. She'll focus on the creative side, and you'll keep handling operations. This is about teamwork." Teamwork. That word landed like an insult. I'd been running this place for 8 years, practically solo. Now, out of nowhere, Sienna swoops in with fancy ideas and Dad treats her like the savior? I forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Sure, teamwork." Sienna clapped her hands together. "Great. I've already started sketching some ideas for the menu layout. I'm thinking minimalist, bold typography, earthy tones, maybe a curated farm-to-table vibe." Curated, farm-to-table. Words I had been using for years, only she said them like they were brand new. Over the next week, Sienna became the center of attention. She posted flashy photos of the diner on Instagram, arranged trendy plating for the burgers, and even convinced Dad to order mason jar glasses. Customers ate it up. Staff adored her energy. And just like that, I started to see Dad defer to her ideas during meetings, nodding along like she had been here all along. My authority, everything I'd built, was slowly slipping away. It was close to midnight when I finally locked the diner doors and sat down in Dad's old office. The day had been long, one of those days where every fryer basket burned and every customer wanted something Sienna had posted about. I rubbed my temples, trying to quiet the irritation buzzing in my head. The office was cluttered with old ledgers and receipts stacked like leaning towers on the desk. I had planned to reorganize the files for months but never found the time. That night, I decided I'd do it just to take my mind off everything. I started sifting through the filing cabinet, tossing outdated supplier contracts into a box. That's when I found it. An envelope tucked behind the tax folders. My dad's handwriting scrawled across the front read, "Ownership Transfer Brooks Family Diner." A strange chill ran through me. I opened it and saw a notarized document dated 4 months ago. It transferred 70% ownership of the diner to Sienna. My hands shook as I read it again, certain I must have misunderstood. I hadn't. My sister, who had been gone for 10 years, now owned the majority of the diner I'd dedicated my life to. And they hadn't even told me. I sat there, staring at the paper, feeling my stomach twist. Every holiday I had spent alone working, every relationship I had sacrificed, every time I told myself I was doing this to earn my place. All of it felt like a cruel joke. I wasn't the future of the diner. I was just the placeholder until Sienna decided to come home. I don't know how long I sat there before I grabbed my phone and called Eleanor, our longtime manager. She picked up on the second ring, sounding groggy. "Eleanor, did you know about this?" I asked, my voice sharp. "About Dad signing the diner over to Sienna?" There was a long pause. "Amelia, I thought you knew. Your dad made the decision months ago. He said it was time for Sienna to bring the diner into the future." I laughed, but it wasn't from humor. It was bitter, hollow. All this time and no one thought to tell me? Not you? Not even Mom? "I'm sorry," Eleanor whispered. "I wanted to say something, but he made it clear this was between him and your sister. He said you'd still have a role, just not ownership." I finished for her. I hung up before she could say more. I couldn't hear it. Not now. I folded the document, slipped it into my bag, and drove home in silence. By the time I walked through my front door, my anger had hardened into something sharper. I wasn't going to cry about it. Not this time. If they thought they could erase me from the diner's future, they were wrong. Dinner at my parents' house that night was supposed to be casual, but I wasn't in the mood to play nice. The notarized document burned like a hot coal in my bag as I sat at the table, pretending to pass the green beans. Sienna sat across from me, chatting about some concept photo shoot she wanted to do at the diner, all while Dad listened like she was the second coming of Julia Child. I couldn't stand it another second. Actually, I said, interrupting her mid-sentence, I found something interesting at the diner last night. Everyone looked at me. My mom paused with her fork in midair, and Sienna tilted her head like a curious cat. I reached into my bag, pulled out the ownership transfer, and slammed it on the table. Care to explain this? The silence was immediate. Dad's eyes narrowed. Where did you get that? From your office, I said, my voice shaking with anger. When were you planning to tell me that you handed the diner over to Sienna after I'd worked myself into the ground for nothing? Now hold on, Dad said, his tone stern. You're overreacting. We just felt Sienna could take the diner in a fresh direction. You're great with the day-to-day, Amelia, but you're too rigid. The future requires flexibility. Rigid? I repeated, my voice rising. Rigid is what kept that place alive. I'm the one who turned things around when it was on the verge of failing. I'm the one who's been there every single day for 8 years while Sienna was off snapping pictures of shrimp cocktails in Italy. Don't drag me into this, Sienna said with a scoff. This isn't personal. Dad just knows I can bring some creative energy to the business. You still have a valuable role. A role like what? Assistant to the real owner? I shot back, my hands trembling. Amelia, calm down, Mom said, reaching out as if to soothe me. No, I said, pushing my chair back with a loud scrape. I'm done being calm. You want to hand the diner to your golden child? Fine. But I won't sit there and pretend to smile while you erase everything I've worked for. Dad's face hardened. If you can't handle this like an adult, maybe you should take a step back. I let out a bitter laugh. Don't worry. I'm more than stepping back. I stood, grabbed my bag, and looked directly at all of them. I quit. Effective immediately. The diner can sink or swim without me. Mom gasped. Amelia, don't do this. I've already done it, I said, turning toward the door. I'm done being the family workhorse. Find someone else to pick up the slack. And with that, I walked out, not once looking back. 3 days after I walked out, I still hadn't heard from Dad or Mom. Not even a text. I told myself I didn't care, but every time I drove past the diner, my stomach twisted. That place was my life. And now it was like watching someone else live in my house. It was Eleanor who broke the silence. She called me late one evening, her voice low and uneasy. Amelia, she said, I think you need to know something. My chest tightened. What is it? It's about your seasonal farm-to-table menu, she said. Sienna's planning to present it as her new concept to some local investors tomorrow. She's saying it's her creation. For a second, I couldn't even speak. You mean the menu I spent 2 years developing? The one I tested and tweaked every season? Yes, Eleanor said softly. She's got all the drafts you left in the office. She's repackaging them. Amelia, I didn't want to call, but I couldn't just watch her take credit for your work. I felt my blood boil. Thanks for telling me, I said. My voice clipped. I'll handle it. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every dish I had spent months perfecting, the caramelized onion tart, the herb-roasted chicken, the peach cobbler made with local honey, all of it was mine. It was more than just a menu. It was my proof that I was more than rigid and ordinary. Now Sienna was going to stand in front of investors and pretend she dreamed it up between photo shoots. The next day, I drove to the diner, parking far enough away that no one would notice my car. Through the front windows, I saw them gathered around the biggest table. Dad, Sienna, a couple of men in suits, and even a local food blogger I recognized. I slipped inside quietly and stood near the back wall. No one saw me. Sienna was at the head of the table, animated and confident, walking them through the concept like it was her masterpiece. Imagine a rotating seasonal menu, she said, flashing her perfect smile. Each dish inspired by local farms and crafted with the freshest ingredients. I want Brooks Family Diner to become a culinary destination. I clenched my fists so tightly my nails dug into my palms. That was my idea. My words. By the time I left, I already knew what I had to do. I'd fight back, but this time I'd be armed with proof. The original recipes, all with my name and timestamps to show exactly who created them. I didn't bother calling first. If I gave Dad a warning, he'd just brush me off or tell me I was overreacting. I needed to see him face to face. I asked him to meet me at a quiet lakeside cafe early the next morning. When he arrived, he looked tired but calm, like he thought this was just another one of our little family misunderstandings. "What's this about, Amelia?" he asked, sitting across from me. I pulled a folder out of my tote bag and slid it across the table. "Take a look," I said. He flipped through the pages, frowning. They were copies of my original recipes, menu drafts, cost analysis sheets, all stamped with digital timestamps from the last 2 years. At the bottom, I'd added screenshots of the emails I'd sent him about the seasonal concept, long before Sienna ever came home. "What am I looking at?" he asked carefully. "My work," I said. "The same work Sienna just presented to investors yesterday. She took my menu, my concept, my words, and she called it hers." He sighed, setting the folder down. "Amelia, you're being dramatic. It's all family business. You both want the diner to succeed. Why does it matter whose idea it was?" I leaned forward, my voice low but steady. "It matters because I built this. I gave up everything for that diner while Sienna was halfway around the world living her dream. And now you're letting her walk in and take credit for my blood and sweat." He looked at me, his face hardening. "You're too emotional about this. That's the problem, Amelia. You've always been too attached to every little detail. You need to let go sometimes." "Let go?" I laughed bitterly. "You want me to let go of the one thing I've worked my whole life for? No." Not this time. I pulled out another document, a printed draft of a press release I'd written the night before. "If you don't recognize my contributions and give me my fair share of ownership, I'll take this to the press and to every investor Sienna is trying to charm. They'll know exactly who built that menu and exactly how this family treats the person who's kept the diner alive." His jaw tightened. "Are you threatening me?" "Yes," I said plainly. "I'm done being quiet. Either I get a fair stake in the diner, equity, authority, and acknowledgement, or I walk away for good and I make sure everyone knows why." He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the battle behind his eyes. Finally, he leaned back in his chair, exhaling heavily. "You've changed," he muttered. "No," I said. "I've just stopped letting you ignore me." 2 days after the lakeside meeting, Dad called and told me to come to the diner office. His tone was clipped, almost reluctant, like he'd rather be anywhere else. When I walked in, Sienna was already there, sitting with her arms folded like a queen defending her throne. Beside her was Mr. Calder, our family's lawyer. Dad didn't waste time. "Let's just get this over with," he said. "Amelia, you've made your demands clear. We'll hear them." I sat down, placing my folder of evidence on the table. 40% ownership, I said, looking directly at Dad, and full control over menu development and daily operations. "I'm not working as a shadow anymore. If you want me here, it'll be as a partner, not as the help." Sienna rolled her eyes. "You can't be serious. I'm the one bringing in investors and creating a new image for this place. You can't just waltz in with demands like that." I turned to her, my voice sharp but even. "You're welcome to your photo shoots and marketing campaigns, but don't pretend you built this diner. You've been here, what, 2 months? I've kept this place alive for 8 years. If you think I'll let you erase that, think again." "Girls," Dad interrupted, rubbing his forehead. "This isn't a competition." "It already is," I said. "You made it one when you handed 70% of the diner to Sienna behind my back." Mr. Calder cleared his throat. "Thomas, Amelia has a point. Her work is well documented, and if this becomes a public dispute, the optics won't be good for investors. It might be smarter to come to a formal agreement now." Sienna looked like she'd swallowed something sour. "So what? We just hand her half the diner because she's throwing a tantrum?" I leaned forward. 40%, not half, but enough to make sure I can actually protect the place I've spent my life building. If that's too much for you, I'll walk, and you can explain to the investors why the person who doubled revenue suddenly disappeared." Dad stared at me for a long time. Finally, he sighed, shoulders slumping. "Fine," he said quietly. 40%. You'll handle all operational and menu decisions. Sienna, you'll focus on photography and marketing. No more stepping on each other's roles." Sienna crossed her arms tighter but said nothing. I could feel her glare, but I didn't care. For once, I wasn't backing down. The first day I walked back into the diner as a co-owner, everything felt different. It wasn't just about the title or the paperwork, it was the way the staff looked at me. For the first time, they didn't see me as just the boss's daughter, they saw me as someone who had earned her place. The first thing I did was call a staff meeting. We gathered in the back room where the walls were covered with faded photos of Dad smiling next to regular customers. I stood at the front, arms crossed, feeling the weight of everyone's eyes. "We're making changes," I said, my voice steady. "Real changes. Not just for the customers, but for all of you." I rolled out a new schedule that gave everyone at least one weekend off each month. No more endless doubles that left people running on fumes. I also announced a pay raise. Not much, but enough for everyone to feel it. When the room erupted with murmurs of approval, I felt a flicker of pride. Next, I turned my focus to the menu. For months, I'd been sitting on the seasonal farm-to-table concept, but now I had the freedom to launch it under my name. I spent late nights testing new dishes with Eleanor and the kitchen crew. Every time we nailed a recipe, like the roasted beet salad with goat cheese or the bourbon-glazed pork chops, I felt like a piece of myself was stitched back together. Meanwhile, I didn't stop Sienna from doing what she was good at. She took photos, redesigned the diner's Instagram page, and handled marketing campaigns. But she wasn't calling the shots anymore. She had to run every idea past me, and I made sure my vision for the food always came first. The payoff came faster than I expected. Within weeks of launching the seasonal menu, local food bloggers started talking about us. Then, a major Portland food magazine called and asked to feature me as the heart behind Brooks Family Diner. When the issue hit the shelves, there was my face on the glossy page, flour on my apron, smiling in front of the chalkboard menu I'd handwritten myself. Dad saw it, and for once he didn't try to take credit. He just nodded and said, "You did good, kid." The customers noticed the changes too. They weren't just coming for the old favorites anymore. They came for my new dishes, the ones with my name attached. It felt like the diner was finally becoming a reflection of who I was, not just who Dad used to be. Even Sienna seemed to soften. One night, as we closed up, she lingered by the counter. "You know," she said, her tone quieter than usual. "You're really good at this. Better than I thought." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that your way of saying sorry?" She smirked. "Maybe." It wasn't a full apology, but it was a start. And for the first time in months, I felt like we might actually be able to work together, as long as she knew where the line was. 6 months later, the diner didn't just feel alive, it felt unstoppable. What had once been a dusty small-town eatery had grown into something people were driving hours to visit. Our catering business had taken off after I pitched the idea to a local music festival. We landed the contract, and for 3 weekends straight, my seasonal menu was served to thousands of people. The success was undeniable. Investors who had once only listened to Sienna now wanted to meet with me directly. They weren't just buying into the Brooks name anymore. They were buying into my vision. One evening, as I closed up the diner, Dad walked in. He looked older somehow, like the weight of running the place had finally lifted now that I had taken the reins. "You've done good, Amelia," he said, resting his hand on the counter. "Better than I ever could have. I think it's time I step back completely. This is your diner now." I stared at him for a moment, letting the words sink in. For years, I had worked for his approval, wondering if it would ever come. And here it was, quiet, almost casual, but real. "Thanks, Dad," I said, my voice softer than I expected. Even Sienna had changed. She wasn't trying to outshine me anymore. In fact, she came by one afternoon and showed me a new batch of photos she'd taken of the festival catering setup. "You were right," she admitted. "Your menu is what put us on the map. I just helped dress it up." I didn't rub it in. For once, I just smiled. We both played a part. Later that night, I sat in my office, staring at the framed menu sketch on the wall. It was the first draft of my seasonal concept, the one I'd almost lost to my sister's ambition. I had written a note at the bottom in black marker. "Worth isn't given, it's claimed." I realized that I no longer saw myself as an heir waiting for permission to lead. I was the owner now, not because Dad handed it to me, but because I'd fought for it tooth and nail. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't standing in anyone's shadow. This was my vision, my hard work, my future, and it felt damn good.